I thought it was a beautiful moment. One of those full circle scenes life hands you wrapped in nostalgia and peace. I thought I was being kind, sentimental even. And yet within minutes, the man I built a life with the man I loved turned around, walked out of the hospital room, and never came back. No yelling, no goodbye. Just the soft click of the door and a silence that still rings louder than any scream ever could. I was left alone, in a hospital gown, holding a newborn, and realizing too late that one small choice had shattered everything. Let me take you back to that moment. I had just given birth hours of labor pain and overwhelming emotion. I was exhausted, shaking, barely holding it together, but also glowing with pride. I had our baby in my arms, our daughter, our miracle. My husband had been there during the whole process, holding my hand, whispering encouragement, crying when she was born. It felt like the most intimate and powerful moment we'd ever shared, and for a little while everything was perfect, until I made a choice that felt harmless in the moment, something I thought was symbolic, something I thought he would understand. You see, my ex and I had a long history. We'd been high school sweethearts, college partners, and had gone through years of ups and downs before finally admitting we weren't right for each other. The breakup had been clean. No screaming matches, no cheating, just two people growing in different directions. We stayed in touch over the years, mostly through birthdays, and the occasional hope you're well message. When I got married, he congratulated me. When I got pregnant, he sent well wishes. Nothing inappropriate, nothing more. Just history. He happened to be at the hospital that day visiting his sister who had given birth the day before. He sent a quick text, heard the baby arrived. Congratulations. I responded, still floating on post-birth adrenaline. He was just outside. He asked if he could come by. And I said yes. It wasn't meant to mean anything. I thought of it as closure, as a quiet moment between two people who had shared a past now acknowledging the future had arrived. He walked in, eyes soft smiling. He said hello, congratulated me, and stood beside the bed. I offered to let him hold the baby just for a second. It felt poetic at the time. Symbolic. I didn't think about optics. I didn't think about timing. I didn't think at all. And that's when my husband walked back into the room. If I'm going to be honest, it didn't start as a love story, not the kind you read about anyway. My ex and I met when we were kids, literally. He was the boy who threw pencils at me in middle school and dared me to eat glue for $5. He wasn't sweet, he wasn't thoughtful, but he was always there. Our friendship turned into something more in high school, the way it often does when you're young and don't yet know the difference between comfort and compatibility. He was my first kiss, my first love, my first everything. And in those early years, that felt like enough. We went through prom, together college applications, part-time jobs, and breakups that never really stuck. Our relationship was built on history, on shared jokes and default routines. But that doesn't mean it was good. We had passion, yes. But it came with chaos. The kind of chaos that starts off feeling exciting, but eventually becomes exhausting. We argued often. He hated how emotional I could be. I hated how he shut down when things got too real. We broke up more times than I could count, only to get back together like we had something to prove. There were moments when I truly thought we'd make it work, moments when we looked like every Instagram couple who had figured it out. But behind closed doors, we were just two people clinging to the idea of love, not the reality of it. Eventually, we ended things for good during our final year of college. It was mutual, at least on the surface. No big blowout fight. Just two exhausted people sitting across from each other at a diner, both knowing that if we didn't walk away now, we'd end up resenting each other forever. We said goodbye with teary smiles, hugged in the parking lot, and that was it. Or so we thought. We stayed in touch more than we probably should have. At first, it was under the excuse of tying up loose ends, shared bills, apartment leases, that kind of thing. But even after that was done, we kept texting. Birthdays, holidays, random check-ins. And to be fair, it was innocent. He dated other people. I dated other people. Eventually, I met my husband. And when things with him got serious, I made a conscious effort to pull away, to create space, to give my full self to the man who was building a life with me. My ex respected that. He didn't push. He didn't pry. He stepped back, but he never fully disappeared. And I didn't push him away entirely either, because part of me, I think, liked the idea of being able to say, we ended things right. We're still friends. It made me feel mature, evolved, like I was living proof that not all breakups had to end in flames. My husband knew about my past with him. I was honest from the beginning. I told him everything may be too much. He never said he was uncomfortable. He never asked me to cut ties. He played it cool, said he trusted me. And I believed him. Or maybe I just wanted to believe that love meant never having to let go of the past completely. But looking back now, I see it differently. I remember small things, like how my husband's voice would get just a little tighter whenever my ex's name came up. Or how he'd glance at my phone when I got a message I didn't open right away. How he never said anything but his silence wasn't quite the peaceful kind, it was restrained, controlled. He didn't want to be the insecure one. He didn't want to come off as jealous. So he swallowed it. And I let him, because it was easier than confronting the possibility that I might be the one holding on too tightly to something I should have let go. Our relationship moved fast. My husband and I fell in love quickly, one of those whirlwind romances that makes you feel like maybe the universe got something right. He was everything my ex wasn't: calm, consistent, grounded. He made me feel safe in a way I didn't know I needed, and when he proposed, I didn't hesitate. I said yes with tears in my eyes and a full heart. He was my future. I had no doubts. Even during my pregnancy, he was my rock. Every craving, every mood swing, every panic attack, I leaned on him, and he never once let me fall. We read parenting books together, painted the nursery, talked about what kind of parents we wanted to be. He was there for every appointment, every late-night worry. I had never felt more sure of anything in my life. And yet, when my ex texted me the day before my due date to wish me luck, I replied. When he sent another message the next day asking if everything went okay, I answered. When he mentioned he was at the hospital visiting his sister and asked if it would be weird to stop by and say hello, I paused. I looked at the baby in my arms. I thought about everything we had been through. And I said, sure, just for a minute. I didn't think about how it would look. I didn't think about how it would feel to the man who had waited on me hand and foot for 9 months. I didn't think about the timing or the symbolism or the message it might send. I just thought about the poetry of it, the full circle, the story. And in doing that, I forgot about the reality. I forgot about what mattered most. And in that forgetfulness, I made the mistake that changed everything. Pregnancy changed me in ways I didn't expect. Physically, emotionally, mentally, it felt like every cell in my body was shifting, and through all of it, my husband stood by me like an anchor. From the moment we saw those 2 pink lines, he became the version of himself I hadn't even known existed, tender, attentive, protective, in a quiet, steadfast way. He read every book, downloaded every app, followed every pregnancy blog. I remember waking up one morning in the first trimester to find him in the kitchen with 4 different boxes of cereal, trying to figure out which one wouldn't make me nauseous. Just pick one, I mumbled. But he wouldn't. He wanted to get it right. That's who he was. Every appointment he held my hand. He asked the doctor questions I was too embarrassed or too overwhelmed to ask myself. When I cried over nothing because I didn't like the color of the new baby blanket, or because someone on TV died, he never rolled his eyes. He just wrapped his arms around me and let me cry into his t-shirt until I fell asleep. He installed the crib by himself, piece by piece, even though the instructions made no sense, and he spent 3 hours cursing under his breath. He painted the nursery in the exact shade of soft sage I had shown him once in a random Pinterest screenshot. He even put up the string lights I said were probably too much because he said the baby would love them. And he was excited. That's what I remember most. He talked to the bump every night like it was already a person. He'd rest his hand on my belly and say, "Hi, little one. It's your dad. I can't wait to meet you." And then he'd kiss it gently like a ritual. It melted me every time. We had names picked out by month 4. We practiced swaddling with teddy bears. He made a playlist of lullabies and another one just for me for the delivery room filled with songs I loved. He said he wanted the moment our baby was born to be perfect, and he would do everything he could to make it that way. We didn't fight much during the pregnancy. Not about anything big. Sure, we had the occasional disagreement about whether we needed a wipe warmer or how many outfits a newborn really needs, but nothing that lingered. He was calm and patient, even when I wasn't. Especially when I wasn't. And deep down, I think I relied on that patience more than I realized. It became easy to assume he'd always be there, that his kindness would always outweigh his anger, that he wouldn't break even if I pushed. But everyone has a breaking point. Even the calmest hearts can shatter. We had plans, big ones. We talked about the kind of parents we wanted to be, soft, firm, fair. We promised we'd always show up for our child even when we didn't have the answers. We dreamed about vacations and birthday parties and family traditions we'd start from scratch. He said he wanted to teach our child how to ride a bike. I said I wanted to bake cookies together every Sunday. We painted pictures of the future so vividly it felt like they were already real. He even started writing letters to the baby, a journal really, where he documented how he was feeling as the due date got closer. I found it once on the nightstand. I read a few lines and started crying. He had written, "You're not even here yet, and already you've made me a better man." When my water broke, he was in the middle of brushing his teeth. He rushed into the bedroom with foam still around his mouth, asking, "Is it time? Is this real?" I nodded, and he dropped everything, grabbed the bag we had packed weeks before, got me into the car, and stayed calm even when I was shaking and scared. In the delivery room, he never let go of my hand. Not once. Even when I yelled at him during contractions, even when I cried and said I couldn't do it, he just kept whispering, "You're doing amazing. You're almost there. We're so close." And then suddenly, she was here. Our daughter. Tiny, red-faced, crying like the world had been too loud to arrive in. They placed her on my chest and everything else disappeared. He cried. I cried. The nurse cried. It was perfect. It was overwhelming. It was everything. He cut the cord with shaking hands and kissed me on the forehead, telling me how proud he was. And in that moment, I believed nothing could ever go wrong again. We had made a person. A real, breathing person. How could anything ever touch us now? But perfection is fragile, and sometimes the cracks don't show until it's too late. That's why when I saw that message from my ex, just a simple, "Congratulations. So happy for you," I didn't think twice about responding. I didn't pause to consider how it might feel to my husband not in that moment. I was still high on adrenaline and love and exhaustion. When he asked if he could stop by for a minute, just a minute, I said yes. I told myself it was closure. I told myself it was harmless. I told myself it was polite. What I didn't tell myself was the truth that sometimes even the smallest gestures carry more weight than we realize, and that when you're standing at the very start of something new, the last thing you should do is open the door to something old. The hospital room was still glowing with that surreal kind of peace that only comes after giving birth. I was exhausted beyond exhausted, really, but there was also a calmness wrapped around me like a blanket. My husband had stepped out for a moment to call his mom, I think, or maybe to grab something from the nurse's station. It's hard to remember. Time felt strange in that room. The baby was swaddled in soft pink, sleeping peacefully in my arms, her tiny chest rising and falling like she was already dreaming. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my ex. Congrats. Heard the baby arrived. I'm at the hospital visiting my sister. Mind if I stop in for a quick hello? I stared at the screen, unsure for a second. Not because I thought it was wrong, but because I didn't want to overthink it. It felt small, friendly. We had history, sure, but it was behind us. He knew that. I knew that. We'd been in touch here and there over the years, and nothing had ever crossed a line. He was dating someone else now, I think, maybe even engaged. I didn't keep up anymore. But we had a past that had once meant something, and now here we were in this odd twist of fate becoming parents at the same time, me with my husband, him with his sister's newborn just a few rooms down. So I said yes. I texted back, "Sure, just a minute." Then I put my phone down and looked at my daughter again, completely unaware that that one small choice would become the pivot point of everything. A few minutes later, there was a soft knock at the door. I said, "Come in," without hesitation. He walked in slowly, a little cautious, holding a small bouquet of yellow flowers, cheap ones, probably from the gift shop downstairs, but still thoughtful. He smiled, and for a brief moment we both just stood there, caught in a quiet recognition of how far we'd come. We'd been kids when we met, and now, here we were, grown separate, changed, looking at the life I had just brought into the world. "She's beautiful," he said softly, eyes fixed on the baby. "Looks like you." I laughed a little. "Poor girl," I joked. He chuckled. It felt light, easy, harmless. And maybe because I was running on 2 hours of sleep and a flood of hormones, or maybe because I was clinging to some emotional poetry that made no sense, I asked him, "Do you want to hold her for a second?" He hesitated. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "It's fine. Just for a minute." And I believed that. I believed it was fine. I lifted my daughter gently and placed her in his arms. He looked awkward at first, uncertain, like he didn't know where to place his hands, but then she shifted slightly, let out a soft sigh, and settled against him like she belonged there. His face changed, softened, his shoulders relaxed. For a moment, he wasn't my ex. He wasn't a symbol of our past. He was just a man holding a baby standing in the middle of a hospital room filled with quiet and warmth. And that's exactly when the door opened. My husband stepped in, a smile still halfway across his face. He had 2 cups of coffee in his hand, ready to toast to this new chapter. But when his eyes landed on what was in front of him, his wife in bed and his newborn daughter cradled in the arms of the man she used to love, everything about him changed. The smile disappeared. The warmth drained from his eyes. He froze in the doorway like the wind had been knocked out of him. And the worst part, I didn't react fast enough. I didn't leap up to explain. I didn't reach out to take the baby back. I just sat there stunned, like I hadn't realized what I'd done until I saw it through his eyes. He didn't speak, not a word. He just stared for what felt like a full minute. Then he placed both coffees on the side table, turned around, and walked out. No slammed door, no yelling, just the soft thud of his shoes against the hospital floor. And then silence. I handed the baby back to my ex immediately. My hands were shaking. I didn't mean... I couldn't even finish the sentence. He looked uncomfortable, unsure of what to say. "I should go," he said quietly, placing the baby gently in my arms. "Take care of yourself, okay?" And then he was gone too. I sat there alone, holding my daughter, and the weight of what had just happened began to press down on me like a tidal wave. I told myself it was just a moment, that once I explained, my husband would understand. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. It wasn't just about who held the baby. It was about what that moment represented. It was about trust, timing, boundaries, respect. And in my desire to make something feel meaningful, I had made someone I loved feel replaceable. And there's no taking that kind of moment back. The room was silent. Not the kind of silence that brings peace, but the kind that rings in your ears. The kind that makes every small sound, every breath, every shift in your seat feel loud and wrong. I stared at the door long after it closed, holding our daughter tightly, my heart racing in my chest like it was trying to outrun what had just happened. I kept thinking he would come back, that the door would swing open, that he would say something, anything, that he would shout or cry or look at me the way he used to. But he didn't. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I tried calling his name softly at first. "Babe." No answer. I buzzed the nurse and asked if they'd seen him. She checked the hallway, then returned with a cautious expression. He said he needed some air, she told me. Didn't say when he'd be back. I nodded, thanked her, pretended it was fine. Pretended I wasn't suddenly a dam holding back the collapse of everything we'd built. I texted him. "Where are you? I didn't mean to upset you. Please come back. Let's talk." The messages stayed unread. Every time a nurse walked by or a door clicked down the hall, I sat up, my heart leaping in hope. But it was never him. The coffee he'd placed on the side table was still there, now cold and untouched. 1 cup for me, 1 for him, like a symbol of the conversation we never got to have. I called his phone, straight to voicemail. I left a message, then another, then a third. Each one more panicked than the last. I kept looking at our daughter, so small, so perfect, so innocent in all of this. I whispered to her, "He'll come back. He loves you. He loves us. He's just overwhelmed." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it anymore. By the time evening came, visiting hours were ending. The nurses assumed he'd be back before discharge. They tried to comfort me without saying too much. One even offered to call someone else to come sit with me. I told her no. I was still hoping, still waiting, still clutching my phone like it held the key to undoing it all. And then it buzzed. One new message. From him. My hands shook as I opened it. "You chose him. You didn't even flinch. I saw it in your face. I've never felt so out of place in my own family. I won't be coming back tonight. Maybe not tomorrow either. I need to think." That was it. No anger, no name-calling, just pain raw restrained and so deeply cutting that I felt it like a physical blow. I read it over and over, searching for an opening, a way to reply that would fix things. But what do you say to someone who saw you hand your shared future to the past, even for just a moment? I wanted to scream. To explain. To tell him it wasn't what it looked like, that it meant nothing, that it was just a split-second decision clouded by exhaustion and sentimentality. But would that change how it felt to him? Could any excuse erase the image of walking into a room expecting joy and seeing your wife hand your newborn child to the man she used to love? I didn't sleep that night. I held our baby and cried in silence, afraid that if I sobbed too loudly, I might scare her. I thought about everything we'd been through, the midnight snack runs, the late-night belly kicks he'd feel with a smile, the playlists he made for the delivery room. All of it felt so close and yet now impossibly far. I had hurt the one person who had stood by me without question, and I did it without thinking. That's what broke me the most. In the morning, a nurse asked if my husband would be signing the discharge papers. I didn't know what to say. My throat closed up. I just shook my head and said I'd sign them myself. She nodded gently, probably used to scenes like this, though I imagined not quite like mine. They wheeled me out with the baby in my arms alone. I saw other couples' fathers carrying diaper bags, holding their partners close, smiling down at their newborns like they'd just discovered the secret to the universe. I smiled back weakly, trying to look composed, even as I felt like I was splitting in two. We went home alone. No balloons, no welcome home banner, just silence. Heavy, echoing silence. I placed the baby in the bassinet we'd built together, stared at the rocking chair he'd insisted we buy, and let myself cry the way I hadn't in the hospital. Ugly, full-body sobs. Because it hit me all at once, this wasn't just about a misunderstanding. It was about how fragile trust really is, how fast something sacred can unravel. He didn't come home that day, or the next. And even though I tried to reach out again and again through texts, voicemails, even a long letter I slipped under his friend's door, I didn't hear from him. His silence said more than any argument ever could. It wasn't about whether I loved him. It was about the fact that in one single moment I had made him question whether I saw him as my first choice, or just the man I ended up with. And when someone you love begins to doubt their place in your heart, sometimes all they can do is leave it. Regret is a strange thing. It doesn't always show up right away. At first, you're too busy defending yourself to others to yourself. You replay the moment, try to frame it differently, soften the edges. You tell yourself, it wasn't that bad. You say, he overreacted. You hold tight to the version of events that protects you from the pain of knowing the truth that you hurt someone not out of malice, but out of thoughtlessness. And sometimes, that's even worse. In those first few days after he left the hospital, I kept telling myself he'd come home, that this was just a bump, a misunderstanding that would pass. But as the silence dragged on, that confidence began to erode, and in its place came questions. Questions I didn't want to answer, like why I hadn't flinched when my ex walked into the room, why I hadn't hesitated to let him hold the baby, why I hadn't immediately taken our daughter back when I saw the look on my husband's face, why I didn't instinctively protect his place in that moment. Because that's what it came down to, didn't it? Place, position, significance. It wasn't about jealousy or possessiveness. It wasn't even about my ex. It was about my husband feeling for the first time like a guest in his own life, like the man who had stood by me through every appointment, every hormonal breakdown, every sleepless night of worry suddenly didn't matter. And the part that still haunts me is that in that moment, I didn't notice. That realization cracked something open in me. I started remembering little things, moments I had brushed off but that now stood out in painful clarity, like the time I mentioned my ex in passing and my husband's smile faltered ever so slightly. Or the time he asked me if I ever thought about the past, and I laughed and said, "Don't be silly." He had insecurities. We all do. But he kept them quiet because he wanted me to feel free, because he trusted me, and I took that trust for granted. I started journaling in the weeks after trying to sort through the guilt and confusion. I wrote down everything I should have said, not just after it happened, but long before. I should have told him that my ex no longer held any space in my heart, that our story had ended long ago and the only story that mattered now was the one we were building. I should have been more mindful of the boundaries I blurred under the guise of maturity and friendliness. I should have seen how messy those lines had become, how easy it was for something innocent to feel like betrayal when viewed from a different angle. It took losing him even temporarily to understand that emotional safety in a relationship isn't just about avoiding big betrayals. Sometimes it's about protecting your partner from the small, unintentional ones, the casual dismissals, the choices that seem harmless until they're not, the moments that send the message, "You're second." I think about boundaries differently now. Before I thought of them as walls rigid limiting built out of insecurity, but now I see them as signs of respect, not restrictions, but agreements, promises to say, "You matter more than my pride, more than appearances, more than nostalgia." If I could go back, I wouldn't just change that moment in the hospital, I'd change all the moments leading up to it. The ones where I could have reaffirmed his place, reassured him without being asked. But I didn't because I assumed he already knew. And maybe he did, until he didn't. There's a certain kind of pain that comes from realizing you were the villain in someone else's story, even for a moment, especially when all you wanted was to be the hero. And yet, I couldn't erase the fact that I had handed the most intimate, sacred first moment of his daughter's life to a man who had nothing to do with our future. I did it with good intentions, but I failed to see how deeply it would cut. And that's the danger of assumptions. They make us careless with people who deserve our full attention. The worst part was knowing that even if he came back, even if he forgave me, something had been damaged. A thread had been pulled. And while forgiveness might sew it back together, the seam would always be visible. We could heal, but we would never be the same. Still, I held on to hope. Not because I believed I deserved it, but because I believed our love did. Because while I had failed him, I still believed in the life we had started, in the home we had dreamed of, in the father I knew he could be, if only I hadn't made him feel like he didn't belong. So I waited. I didn't chase him with more texts. I stopped trying to justify the moment. I let the silence stretch not because I wanted it to, but because I knew he needed it. I needed it too. To sit with the weight of what I had done. To feel the ache of absence without filling it with noise. Sometimes the only way forward is through. Through the guilt, through the discomfort, through the brutal honesty of admitting you were wrong not just in what you did, but in what you failed to protect. And in that space, I began to understand something I wish I had known earlier. Love doesn't just live in the big declarations. It lives in the tiny choices, the 1,000 little moments where we choose each other, especially when no one's watching. I hadn't chosen him in that moment, not really. But maybe, just maybe, I still had time to start again. He never came back. Not that night, not the next day. Not when the baby turned a week old, or when her tiny fingers curled around mine in a way that made my chest ache with love and grief all at once. He didn't come back when I texted him a photo of her yawning, or when I called just to let the phone ring until it sent me to voicemail. He didn't come back when I finally said the words he needed to hear I was wrong. I see it now. Please come home. He never blocked me, never lashed out. He just disappeared. quietly, painfully, like the space he left behind was intentional and final. It's a hard thing to accept that someone who once loved you with every inch of their being can choose in the end to love themselves more. That someone can reach the edge of their patience and for once not turn back, not explain, not give you one more chance to make it right, because they've already given too many. And while I'll never know exactly what he thought as he walked out of that hospital room, I do know what he felt: forgotten, replaced, invisible in a moment that was supposed to belong to him. And once a man like that feels erased, no apology can bring him back. I thought I had time. Time to explain, time to show him the truth, that it wasn't about my ex, that it wasn't about love lost or feelings unresolved, that it was just a misstep, an emotional decision made in a haze of hormones and history. But when it comes to moments that break trust, intention doesn't always matter. Impact does. And my impact was devastating. So no, he never came back. He never held her again, never rocked her to sleep, never stayed up through the midnight feedings or saw her first smile. I did those things alone. And every time I watched her do something new, something beautiful, a part of me would whisper, "He should have seen this." But then another voice, quieter and far more honest, would answer, "You should have protected his place." And I didn't. I failed him. Not with malice, not with betrayal, but with blindness. And sometimes that's all it takes. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. Thank you for sitting with me in this silence, for witnessing the truth I wish I could have faced sooner. Maybe you're someone who's been hurt by a moment like this, quiet, confusing, but irreversible. Or maybe you're the one who made the choice that caused the hurt. Either way, I hope this story reminds you of something important. Love doesn't just die from big betrayals. It dies from the small ones we don't recognize until they've already taken everything. So, if you love someone, protect their place in your life, especially in the moments when it feels easiest to overlook, because you may never get the chance to fix what was lost. And by the time you realize what you had, it might be too late.